In WWE, a receipt happens when you unintentionally hit your opponent for real, and your opponent answers with an even harder shot of his own. Some receipts can be a basic punch or smack, while others arrive as vicious chair shots and savage beatdowns. In this video, we're examining the most notorious and unforgettable receipts in WWE history, starting with the moment Brock Lesnar showed Roman Reigns what he was dealing with that night. At WrestleMania 31, Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns were tearing into each other in the main event, and Reigns chose to begin throwing legitimate knee strikes at Lesnar's head. Now, Lesnar is not the kind of guy who lets that slide. He's a former UFC heavyweight champion, and hard shots from an opponent tend to awaken something inside the beast. Reigns kept attacking, trying to make the match feel like a savage fight, but Lesnar had had more than enough. In front of a packed Levi Stadium and millions watching at home, Brock swung back and slapped Reigns so hard you could hear it ring through the arena. And the beast wasn't finished there. Moments later, Lesnar caught Reigns with a stiff clothesline that sent him spinning over the top rope and crashing to the floor outside. The commentary team almost didn't know what to say, and it became one of the most discussed moments of the match. However, this wouldn't be the last time Brock made an opponent regret getting stiff with him, as we'll see later down the list. But speaking of Lesnar and receipts, his issue with Jeff Hardy in 2002 took things to an entirely different level. During Brock's dominant early run, he was booked as an unstoppable monster. And one of the moves the company used to sell that terror was his release powerbomb. Jeff Hardy was on the receiving end of it repeatedly, night after night, as Lesnar racked up wins over the Hardy Boys. After enduring one too many of those bone-rattling powerbombs, Hardy decided he wasn't going to take it lying down. On the April 8, 2002 episode of Raw, Jeff caught Lesnar with one of the stiffest chair shots in wrestling history. The sound alone made people wince. Jeff later admitted in an interview that after taking those powerbombs match after match, he felt like it was finally his turn to let a frustration out. Lesnar, to his credit, ate it up and didn't retaliate on camera. But the shot was so genuinely hard that people still bring it up as one of the nastiest and most brutal receipts of all time. But if we're speaking of wrestling receipts, we simply cannot leave out The Undertaker. Taker built a reputation over the decades as someone who does not forget when an opponent gets a little too loose with him. And Randy Orton found that out the hard way. During their feud in 2005, Orton went to hit Taker with a chair shot, but he caught him wrong, clipping him with the edge instead of the flat surface. The result was a nasty gash that busted Taker open for real. Undertaker never want to make a scene in the moment, calmly told Orton backstage not to worry about it because his receipt was coming. Orton had to sit with that for months, never quite knowing when the moment would arrive. It finally happened at Armageddon when Taker got Orton alone inside Hell in a Cell and unloaded one of the most thunderous chair shots fans had seen in a while. It was patient, calculated, and exactly the kind of old-school payback Taker was known for throughout his career. Taker's reputation for collecting on debts extended to feuds involving other superstars. And one of the wildest examples came during a tables match at No Way Out 2001. During their feud with the Brothers of Destruction, the Dudley Boys were supposed to level Taker and Kane from behind with chair shots, with Bubba Ray responsible for cracking Taker across the back. Instead, Bubba swung so hard that the lid of the chair popped loose and cracked Taker directly in the head. Furious and dazed, Taker assumed it was Devon who'd hit him since Bubba had actually been aiming for Kane at the time. That mix-up meant Devon ended up eating a beatdown from both Taker and Kane on the outside, while Bubba escaped unscathed. Devon later explained on Taker's podcast that he tried pleading his case in the moment, insisting it wasn't him, but nobody was in the mood to sort out details mid-match. It wasn't until later that Taker figured out the truth that Bubba had been the one who hit him. But not every receipt in WWE history involved chairs and busted open foreheads. During the 2003 Royal Rumble, Tommy Dreamer entered the match armed with his usual arsenal of hardcore weapons, and he wasted no time putting them to use on Chris Jericho. Dreamer caught Y2J with two hard kendo stick shots, and while the first one barely fazed him, the second clearly got Jericho's attention. Rather than shake it off, Jericho decided to even the score immediately. He grabbed a trash can lid and cracked Dreamer with it before finishing the exchange with a kendo stick shot of his own and eliminated Dreamer with an assist from Christian moments later. Jericho's willingness to dish out receipts showed up again years later, though this time the motivation was completely different. On the July 15th, 2010 episode of Superstars, Jericho was in a match with Yoshi Tatsu, a competitor who'd mostly been booked as a bland babyface during his WWE run. Jericho wanted the match to feel like a legit Japanese-style fight and asked Tatsu beforehand to bring some real intensity. Early on, though, Yoshi was still working timid, and it clearly irritated Jericho. So, Jericho decided to light a fire under him the hard way. He slammed Tatsu down, pulled off his knee pad, and dropped the knee directly into his face, busting him open in the process. It was a harsh way to make a point, but it worked. Once Tatsu got patched up and the match resumed, he came out swinging for real, trading stiff shots with Jericho and turning what had been a forgettable house show-style match into something the crowd actually got behind. Jericho later admitted it probably wasn't the most professional way to motivate a young talent, but he wanted a reaction and he got exactly that. However, not all receipts in WWE come from men looking to settle a score. The women's division has produced its fair share of real tension, too. During a 2021 episode of Raw, Charlotte Flair faced the dominant Nia Jax, and a miscommunication in the ring set off a chain reaction. Charlotte started laying into Nia Jax, most of it happening conveniently during a commercial break, so cameras weren't rolling, though even the commentary team seemed caught off guard by how intense it got. Nia Jax, unwilling to just absorb it, eventually reached her limit and decided enough was enough, firing back at Charlotte with a receipt of her own that visibly rocked the multi-time champion. The two continued trading stiff shots for a moment before settling back into the planned finish and completing the match. It was a rare glimpse into how quickly things can boil over between two competitors, even in a match that was never supposed to look like a shoot. But from an in-ring miscommunication to one of the most calculated receipts ever delivered, let's talk about Kurt Angle and Undertaker's exchange during the six-man Hell in a Cell match at Armageddon 2000. Early on, Angle cracked Taker across the head with a genuinely hard chair shot, throwing his entire body into the swing. Taker got his hands up in time to lessen some of the impact, but it was still a shot that set the tone for what was coming later. As the match spilled onto the roof of the cell, Taker called for the timekeeper to toss up a steel chair. It took a few attempts to actually get it up there, but once Taker had it in hand, he made sure Angle knew exactly what was coming. He nailed the Olympic gold medalist with a completely unprotected shot to the head, delivering what's remembered as one of Taker's most iconic receipts. Angle later admitted he was initially furious that WWE eventually phased out unprotected chair shots like that one, calling them a staple of the business. Though, with hindsight and everything now known about head injuries, even he's come around to understanding why the company moved away from them. But while Kurt got his receipt on top of the cell, another incident involving him just a few years later had a very different ending. In 2004, Tough Enough contestant Daniel Puder found himself in an amateur wrestling exchange with Kurt Angle on SmackDown. Puder, drawing on his real MMA background, caught Angle in a Kimura lock that could have genuinely broken the former Olympian's arm had the referee not stepped in. It was a moment that embarrassed Angle on live television. Puder had gone into business for himself, and the locker room doesn't tend to let that slide quietly. At the 2005 Royal Rumble, Puder found out just how steep the price of that moment was. Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and Hardcore Holly all took turns stiffing him with real shots throughout the match, making sure he understood exactly where he stood in the pecking order. Puder later admitted he had no idea what was coming and felt like he was treated with total disrespect that night, humiliated in front of a worldwide audience before his eventual elimination. It wasn't one clean receipt from one man. It was a full roster message delivered collectively about what happens when you make a veteran look bad without earning the right to do so first. Over a decade after this incident, another youngster tried getting stiff with a legend and paid the price. At the 2018 Royal Rumble, Brock Lesnar was matched up in a triple threat contest with Braun Strowman and Kane. Early in their encounter, Strowman caught Lesnar with a stiff knee right to the face, clearly putting some real force behind it. Lesnar wasn't going to let that go unanswered. He fired back almost immediately with a hard right hand, making sure Strowman understood the message loud and clear, essentially warning him to dial the intensity back down. It was a brief moment of two monsters testing each other's limits. But it fit right into Lesnar's long track record of never being the guy who backs down from a stiff shot, regardless of who's standing across from him. But the willingness to answer physicality with physicality wasn't limited to the Lesnars and Undertakers of the world. Even the McMahon family got involved in their fair share of receipts. Shane McMahon found himself on the wrong end of Chris Jericho's frustration at Survivor Series 2016. Shane's punches have never looked particularly clean, but during this match, one of them landed completely flush, catching Jericho right on the nose. Jericho, clearly not thrilled about it, stepped outside the ring to shake it off and kick at the steel steps in frustration. When he climbed back in, Shane was just as clumsy as before, which only made Jericho's response feel more justified. Jericho unloaded with a double kick that looked almost like something out of an action movie, making it clear he wasn't going to just eat sloppy shots for the rest of the match. But while Shane and Jericho stopped before things got out of control, ECW One Night Stand in 2005 gave us one of the nastiest and most brutal receipts in wrestling history. In 2005, word had reached JBL that the Blue Meanie had once called him a bully, and that comment stuck with him. When the show's chaotic brawl broke out, JBL saw his opening and unloaded on Meanie, leaving him bloodied by the time it was over. It looked like the story might end there. But months later, when JBL faced Meanie again, Meanie picked up the win with an assist from Batista. Before the pin even happened though, Stevie Richards stepped in on his friend's behalf and delivered one of the hardest and nastiest chair shots fans had seen in years, catching JBL clean across the head. Randy Orton and Christian had a heated feud over the World Heavyweight Championship on SmackDown in 2011. But 6 years before this rivalry, Orton and Christian were caught up in a program on Raw, where Christian attacked Orton after a match on Raw and ended up bursting Randy's eardrum. A week later, the Viper got his revenge when he decked Christian with a stiff right hand during their match that left Christian with a massive lump on the side of his head. Though in Randy's defense, he'd already warned Captain Charisma before the match that a receipt was coming. But up next, let's talk about an infamous wrestling receipt involving two of the biggest legends in WWE history. Back in 1997, Shawn Michaels was serving as the guest referee in the main event of SummerSlam between Bret Hart and The Undertaker. In the closing moments of the match, HBK cracked Taker with a chair shot before reluctantly counting the pin for Bret Hart. The two would go on to build an entire program off that moment, but Michaels realized just how much force he'd put behind that swing. Later, when the two squared off inside Hell in a Cell at Bad Blood, Michaels made peace with what he'd done in the only way that felt right, and that was by willingly taking a receipt of his own. Taker delivered a chair shot to Michaels that rang his bell, and Michaels accepted it without complaint, treating it as a fair trade for the shot he dealt out earlier. It's one of the rare receipts in wrestling history that wasn't born out of anger in the moment, but out of mutual respect between two legends who understood that some debts, even accidental ones, still need to be paid. But speaking of Taker, the dead man's on-screen persona and his luxury family mansion are two completely different vibes. And if you want a close look inside the million-dollar houses of WWE legends, watch this revealing video.